It's Sunday. It's 7 o'clock. This is the Sit Down with LB. Hello, everyone. It's me, LB. This is the Sit Down with LB. Thank you for joining me another week. This Facebook Live series was created. The series was created to be a place where people could come for advice and to get some information in the pursuit of their careers. As I said before, I've been reached out to many young people, young black people who want to know about being an opera singer in this business. So I'm happy to be back another week with you. Um, it's been a tough week. It's been a very difficult week, as many of you know. I posted that on Facebook, and so I'm okay, and I'm hoping that tonight will be therapeutic for myself, but hopefully, many of us who are dealing with some difficulties, with the current state of what's going on in the United States. And what better guest is there to join me for this week? Thank you, all of you. I see that you're signing in, and I appreciate it. And I can see the comments this week, so thank you so much. What better guest to join me than one of my idols? One of the people when I had this crazy idea in my mind that I was going to pursue being an opera singer. As a 5'5.5", I count the half, African American opera singer. Who could I look to really look at and say this is possible because this person has done it and done it on a high level? And that person for me was George Shirley. So I am incredibly honored to be joined by one of my idols, the fantastic George.
Well, I'm doing very, very well. Thank you very much for inviting me, Larry. It's a great honor and a privilege to sit and speak with you about whatever you would like to know about the, the path that I've been blessed to travel. I believe it was when you came to Ann Arbor to film the graduation recital of a young soprano that I was working with, uh, so, named Solaire, right? And that's right. And you filmed her recital at the time. You were both keeping company, and but I had heard about you. I had heard about you before that. I heard about you when you won the Met auditions. And the person that contacted me was a former student of mine who had, after teaching on the academic level for a few years, decided to go into artist management, right? Earshak. And he called me. He called me after he heard you sing. And he said, "Do you know this singer? Do you know Lawrence Brownlee?" I said, "No, I don't know Lawrence Brownlee." He was so excited about what he had heard you do on stage that eventually he became, I think, your first manager. But he told me at the time on that telephone call, he said, I spoke to one of my fellow managers after the auditions were over. And I told him how excited I was about what I heard you do and about your prospects. And he said, "This fellow told me." He said, "Well, yeah, he's good, but he's not going to go very far." And and Robert said, "Well, why do you say that? What do you mean?" He said, "Well, because he's short and black." And I've wondered in the over the ensuing years of your wonderful career what this manager thought about, what he had said, and whether he wished that he had thought differently about you and had the opportunity to sign and launch you on your career. But Robert took that ball and ran with it. And so that was my first introduction to Lawrence Brownlee. Well, for opera specifically, I'd have to go to one of my close friends from the United States Army Chorus. Because opera, when I was growing up, was not of interest to me. In my household, it was sacred music. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, well,
Am I there now? Hello?
yes. Okay.
Is my sound off? Hello? Hello? Yes.
You're
Mr.
okay.
Shirley? Yes, hello.
You're okay.
My sound is off. You can hear me, correct?
Yes, I
I
can hear you.
I
Can
can
you
see that my
hear
level
me?
is up. Hello, can anyone hear me?
I can.
Hello? Can the
Yes.
audience hear me now? How about now? Yes, now you can hear me, and I don't know what happened. I think, oh, there we go. Thank you all. Look at you all. Thank you. You're wonderful. You can hear me now. Thank you. Sunny boy, all the way in Europe, I believe. Thank you. We can hear each other. Okay, so the question I think you all heard, but Mr. Shirley was going to say how he started in Indianapolis, and he was one. Who was the person that kind of pushed him and encouraged him? You were saying, Mr. Shirley.
Well, the person that pushed me in the direction of an eventual career in opera was one of my close friends and colleagues in the United States Army Corps. Uh, Before that, when I was growing up, the music that I was exposed to was from the church, the African American
Okay.
Episcopal Church, and I sang with my parents starting when I was 4 years old. My mother sang, my father played the piano, and we used to sing at churches around Indianapolis. My parents entered, and I did my first little recital work at that church. And my parents entered me in a children's competition when I was about 5 years old. And I won second prize, which was an opportunity to make my very first recording. And I
Okay.
sang an old Bing Crosby tune, "There's a Gold Mine in the Sky." And my father was my accompanist.
Oh,
My,
great.
my parents had that recording up until the 1970s when they lost it when they moved.
Okay.
But at the end of it, I announced, and my name is George Shirley, and I'm 5 years old. And I can remember watching the recording made back in those days. I went to the studio, and back in those days, they were still making recordings that with the stylus peeled the wax off of the recording as it was being made. And I remember standing there singing, but glued to this wax that was curling off of the disc and falling on the floor. So my early musical experiences were church related.
Okay.
I sang spirituals, and when we moved to Detroit when I was 6 years old, I started learning some sacred songs, art songs with the organist at Ebenezer AME Church in Detroit, Michigan. I was taking piano lessons from her, and she taught me some of my earliest art songs. But opera was not on the radar.
Yes.
When I went to university, Wayne University in Detroit, I was focused on getting a degree as a music teacher. I was so inspired by the high school music teacher that I had at Northern High School, which was not a magnet school, but at that school we had all exposure to every level of classical music. My first experience singing the tenor solos in Messiah was in the 11th grade. We did Messiah every Christmas, and I started singing the solos in the 11th grade. My first experience singing anything from the Verdi Requiem was in the 12th grade on one of our spring recitals when we sang the first chorus, the Kyrie, and I sang the tenor solos. My music teacher at that time was a Caucasian woman from Canada who gave our choir the best choral music on a par with the choirs in the white schools, Cass Tech, which was a famous magnet school. So it was due to her that I really wanted, I decided when I went to college that I wanted to become a music teacher. I had learned to play baritone horn in a community band formed at my church. So my scholarship at Wayne was a band scholarship, not singing.
Oh,
It was a
really?
band.
Wow. I didn't know that.
That's right. But my experience again in the public schools, by the sixth grade, we had been taught to read music. So I was musically literate, as were most of the young people who came out of the public schools in Detroit. And at Wayne, that education continued on a high level. There was no opera program. It was a music education school. But the choral music I sang and sang solos in kept me learning at a high level. And in my senior year, I started teaching at the high school level because there was an emergency opening. And my advisor arranged for me to audition for that job, and I was assigned it. So I was finishing my academic work as I was started teaching on the high school level. And also in that semester, the Glee Club director came to me and said, I want to do a production of Oedipus Rex by Stravinsky.
Okay.
Take a look at the score. Take a look at the role of Oedipus. And let me know if you feel you can do that. And I did. And I said, well, yeah, I think I can. So that became my first experience in lyric drama. I enjoyed it. We did about 3 performances of it with the student orchestra and the male chorus. I still have a recording of that. And the Glee Club director loaned me a recording of Peter Pierce doing
Peter Pierce, yes.
the role with Stravinsky conducting. And I did it. It was a great experience, but it didn't say to me that this is going to be your future.
Okay.
I focused on teaching school, and I had a wonderful choir at Miller High School and a great accompanist. As it turned out, I had 2 young women in my voice class who went on to achieve fame in jazz and also rhythm and blues.
Oh, great.
Martha Reeves of the Vandellas.
Oh, my.
and Kim Weston,
Okay.
also of the Motown, came out of the Motown experience.
Well, you mentioned, sorry.
I'm just saying that my experience was focused wholly on becoming a music teacher. And that was the case. I had my job, I graduated,
Yes.
and then Uncle Sam interrupted that with the draft. Korea had ended about a year before I graduated, but the draft was still in force. So in early 1956, my future wife and I planned to get married in August of 56, and I got a letter from Uncle Sam that spring saying, "Greetings, you're going to be married to me in late June of 56. So it changed all of our plans. Everything that I had worked for was basically gone because I had spent 2 years in the Army. So I went into the Army as a member of the band. And after about 2 weeks of my second weeks of 9 weeks of training, playing in the band, I was so bored that I decided to do something that I had decided not to do before I was drafted. Now, what I'm referring to is this. In my senior year, the word went out from Washington, D.C., that the Army band was forming a chorus, the United States Army Chorus, and they sent information out to the universities across the country to alert young men who were going to be drafted anyway about the possibility of becoming a member of this new unit. And so 3 of my friends, all Caucasian, went to Washington, D.C., to Fort Myer, Virginia, and auditioned for the chorus and were accepted so that they knew where they would go after their first 8 weeks of training. They would go to Washington and become members of the chorus. Now, why didn't I go? Well, the Army Band had been formed in the mid-1920s, I believe, by General Pershing, and it had never had a black member. And
Okay.
so I thought, it's going to be senseless for me to spend money that don't have to go to audition for this course, because my chance of getting into the course would be like a snowball in Hades. So I
Yeah.
decided, no, I'm just going to go and spend my 2 years, plus the fact that the Army course was a 3-year commitment. I didn't want to spend 3 years in the Army. I
Right.
wanted to get my 2 years out of the way, come
Then
back
go
to
back to
Detroit,
teaching.
and resume my teaching position.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't go and audition, but after 2 weeks of playing the flag up in the morning, playing an occasional graduation cycle, it was Fort Myer was Fort Leonard Wood was an engineering post,
Mm-hmm.
and then playing 8 ball, and then playing the flag down at night. I thought, I'm going to go out of my mind if I'm going to spend 2 years doing this. So I decided, along with two of my fellow band members, both of who were Caucasian, to take a leave of absence and go to Washington to audition for the chorus.
Yes.
And the driver had this little 2-door Studebaker with about this much space in the rear seat. So we were just wiped out by the time we got to Cincinnati. So we decided that we would buy airline tickets with what little money we had and fly the rest of the way. We got to the fort, and I'm telling you all this because this explains my path into opera.
Sure.
We got to the fort. My two colleagues sang for the captain, a man named Samuel Laboda, Russian-American, who eventually became the commander of the band, but at that time he was a captain, second man, and the conductor of the chorus. And he told them right off the bat, no, we can't use you. I thought, oh boy. So I did my audition. And he said to me, can you wait a few minutes? I said, yes, sir. A few minutes became about a half hour, and I sat there thinking, yeah, it's going to be the same old stuff. But he came out of the command room, and he said, well, we've decided that we would like to have you join us, if it's what you really want.
Oh, my.
The only time I ever caught Sam Laboda with his pants down was this moment. And I said, sir, if it wasn't what I really wanted, I wouldn't have traveled all night to get here.
Right.
And he looked at me and sort of turned a bit red, and he said, yeah, you're right. So that puts me into an organization of some of the best male singers in the country at that
I would
time.
imagine so, yes.
I mean, many of whom went on to have careers in opera in Europe, at the Metropolitan Opera, and on Broadway. And there I was in this course, the only black face amongst the sea of whites. Many of whom, almost most of whom, were from the South. Some of them were welcoming, bent over backwards to make me feel comfortable. Others were a bit more distant. But it was the turning point for me, because one of these guys, a fellow named Jack Gillespie, who sang in Germany after the chorus, he sang as John Gillis in Heidelberg. And then he came back to the United States and eventually ran the opera program at Texas Tech University and produced singers like Terry Cook, the black.
Okay, I know Terry, yes.
And also Susan Graham. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful singer, great singer, and a fabulous teacher. But it was Jack that kept pushing me to go and sing for a man he was studying with in Washington, D.C. at the time, because most of the chorus singers were studying privately with private teachers in Washington to keep their skills up, what have you. And Jack was studying with an old fella who had had a career in Germany in the early part of last century, and came to the States and sang with the Cincinnati Opera, Zoo Opera, and he might have sung in Chicago, but he was a tenor named Temi Georgi. He was part Turk and part Greek. And he was teaching privately at his home. And I kept putting Jack off, but Jack would not stop. So finally, I just
insistent.
Just to get him out of my hair, I went over and sang for this old fellow. And he looked at me and he said, you studied with me 1 year and I guarantee you'll have a career. Now, he didn't look like he needed money. He had his own home. He
Wow.
seemed to be a very happy man. And nobody had ever said that to me before. I mean, I'd been singing solos in college. I sang solos with the Army Chorus, but no one had said that to me before. And so I went home, and I've said this often. I told my wife, this old fella said, and she made the second mistake that she ever made in her life. She said, "Well, whatever you want to do is all right with me." So I said, "Okay."
She came along for the ride, huh?
Yeah. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to take a chance. I don't know what is out there. I mean, and plus the fact that Timmy Georgie had to know that there were no other black tenors out there, save possibly, save actually the fellow who was singing with the singing sergeants, who was getting out to go up to New York City and sing smaller roles of New York City opera. William Dupree was his name, had a very fine tenor voice, African American. But he was the only one that I knew anything about who was doing anything operatically. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take this leap and see where it takes me. And I'm a man of faith. I believe that I was given a script when I was born. It was part of my dowry, a script that I can't change. I haven't been able to change, but I've had to follow.
Right.
So I believe that it was already written for me to do what I've done. That's the reason why I can't say I take credit for it. It was done, but I was given at conception, at the time I was given that script, I was given what was needed for me to do this and to do it with a degree of success, for which I'm only grateful. So another aspect of this is that about 2 weeks after I decided to sign up for the extra year, because again, as I said, the chorus was a 3-year deal. When they took me in, they did not insist that I add on that 3rd year. So I was in the chorus as a 2-year man.
Right.
But I decided, okay, I'm gonna follow this through. And I signed up for the extra year to have benefits and an income to take care of my family. My wife had just given birth to our daughter at Walter Reed Hospital. And so I would be able to study with Timmy Georgie. About 2 weeks after I signed up, I got a telephone call from New York City from a woman named Sally Tourneau.
Okay.
Said, I run a small opera company in Woodstock, New York. And we just lost one of our tenors, and our bass told me to call you. Well, the bass was a fellow named R. Berberian, who had taken a degree in law from the University of Michigan Law School, but sang with the Glee Club. And Ara never used his law degree, but wound up singing for about 22 years as a bass at the Metropolitan Opera. Go figure.
Okay.
So Ara had gotten out of the Army about 2 months or so before I was due to get out. And he knew that I was going to get out about this time. And he had a contract for that summer with the Tourneau opera players. And when they lost their tenor, he told Sally Tourneau to call me. This is how things work. And so she called, she said, can you join us this summer? And I said, I can't. I just signed up for an extra year in the Army. But please remember me, because I'll be getting out next year, about this time in May.
Okay.
He said, well, come up in January and audition for us, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
And I put the telephone down, and I looked up and I said, are you trying to tell me something? So that is how the whole operatic thing became a part of my life. I auditioned in January, and they gave me a contract. This was a perfect place to start. A small wooden theater in a former artists' colony on Birdcliff Mountain.
Sure.
Seated about 200 people, 2 pianos, no chorus, only 7 singers, and we sang everything, the solo stuff and the choral stuff.
Right.
My debut in Die Fledermaus, everything was in English, thank God.
Right.
I sang Rodolfo, I sang Belmonte, I sang Torquemada in Loreto, I sang Harun in Jamile. It was the perfect place for me to get my feet wet in this thing called opera.
Oh
And
my
when I walked
gosh.
out on stage, when I walked out on that little stage that first night, I knew I was at home. I knew that I was getting ready
You
to
felt that it was
do
right.
what I knew that it
Yes.
was right. I knew that I was doing what I was born to do. Now, the company was all, they were all white singers. So my first Mimi was Caucasian. My
How
first
did that go over?
Rosalind was Caucasian.
I mean, how did that go over,
Sorry?
and how did that go over, and how did they treat you, you being a black man? Because this is year what? This is 19 what? This
This
is
was
19
1959. Now, there was no
1959.
problem because they had had a black tenor about a couple of seasons before that.
Oh, really?
And I don't know what happened to his career. It was a name that I never really saw again. But they they had no problems with color.
Okay. Because
The two the two
usually in the
sopranos,
arts,
yeah.
usually in the arts, you find people are more accepting and more open to diversity and everything like that. But it's interesting to hear that back in 1959, you know, I was born in 1972. And so anything that came before the 1960s, we have this, I think, idea in our heads that it was really segregated. It was really, you know, not the opportunity, especially for a romantic lead to advance in opera. And so, just really quickly, I know a lot of people are saying that there's an echo. So, I don't know how we can fix that per se, but I hope it's okay and you can endure it, Mr. Shirley. I think it's an echo from your side, but
Okay,
I think you're fine.
okay. I don't know if you can hear me now. Got a little closer to my telephone, so I'm backing up a little bit. Maybe that'll
Maybe
fix it.
that may help it. That may help, and I'm not exactly sure. But really quickly, I wanted to say thank you. There's a lot of people signing in and saying things. Sharon Daniel said that her husband, the baritone Dan Sullivan, is watching, and he sang in Pershing's own U.S. Army Corps the same year that you were there, the same years that you were there. So the thing I love about it is when I told people that I would be having you on here, everybody that I talk to, they love you. And they remember you, and they remember your great work, and they remember that you're a wonderful person. So I have people from out of the country, in Europe, and Chicago, and various places that are signed on here to listen to you. So thank you for being here. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were saying something about them not having a problem with you being a black man as a tenor lead, which is most times the romantic lead.
Right. Well, the thing is that this company was not representative of every company in the United
Of
States at that
course.
time. The company was started at Hunter College. The
Okay.
two sopranos, there were two lead sopranos, and they had been students at Hunter, and they were started by a faculty person there. And so it was a completely different kind of feeling, of atmosphere with these individuals that I worked with.
Yes.
And in Woodstock, it was an artist's, and still is, an artist's colony. So one might think that there was a bit more feeling for not excluding people because of color, because of sexuality, because of
Okay.
the group, the artists, and this little company had a strong following from the community. So, in so many ways, as I said, it was the perfect place for me to get my feet wet, to
Yes.
get started. I met some wonderful people there, including Yehudi Weiner, who
Okay.
is a composer whose works I've sung, and who was the pianist for the Bach aria group for many years. And it was a wonderful experience for me, for my wife, and for our little girl. We all
Yes.
lived in a coach house across from the theater, and it was sort of a family-like experience. One of the people I sang with and met there was Spiro Malas.
Of course, I know who that is.
Spiro and I are sort of like brothers. Our careers started together there, and we sang together often, and just a great friend of mine. So at that time, if I had come along as a tenor, say 10 years earlier, it wouldn't have happened. Maybe even 5 years earlier, it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have happened. But for some reason, and I can only say there's a divine hand in this, things were beginning to move in a slightly
Shift.
different direction. Yes. I
Okay.
mean, Marian Anderson's debut at the Metropolitan Opera in 54, I believe it was. And right after that, the man who was supposed to be the first black singer, Robert McFerrin Sr.,
Yes.
he moved out of the way to give Anderson that honor. And
Wow.
no one argued. I mean, he had been one of the Metropolitan Opera auditions winners, and he had been in training in the Catherine Turney Long School for a number of months, a longer time than some of the others who had won the auditions and had been taken into the Catherine Turney Long School. Why longer? I don't know. But when the opportunity came for Anderson to become the first singer, I don't think that I can't speak for him, but I'm sure that he recognized that. Yeah, who else at this point should get the honor of being number one because of what she has meant to the arts and
Of course.
to America and to our people. And then he became the first black male singer
man. Yes.
to sing leading roles at the Met. So that was the beginning of opening things up, and that was due to Rudolph Bing.
Bing. Yes.
Before that, people weren't going to touch bringing black singers in.
Especially
But
tenors, you know.
Bing walked his own road,
Mm-hmm.
and he did what he felt needed to be done. So he opened the doors to black singers. And after McFerrin came along a considerable list of female singers.
Of course.
Davy, Mattie Wilder Dobbs, Martina Arroyo, and Leontine Price.
Many women.
Yes, because women were, but no longer, I think, given the things the way they are today, women were considered less of a threat to
Exactly.
power.
Exactly.
And indeed, if they were really great at what they did, they could be a rose in, a crown, a jewel in the male's crown, because he has recognized great talent. So I think that answers the question that many people have about why so many women. Again, in a male-dominated administrative world, the women are no threat. But now that's not the case, because we've got women who have shown their power, like Carol Fox, who ran Chicago Opera and ran it with great success and efficiency, and others. But at that time, to allow a male in the door could be seen as being a threat, and also being something that, especially if the male is going to sing romantic leads,
Exactly.
white sopranos, come on. I mean, my first tour with the Metropolitan Opera went naturally to the South.
Oh,
and I was told by people, be careful when you go to Memphis, because that's going to be tough. They didn't say anything about Atlanta. So we went to Atlanta first, and the black members, there was me, and there were a couple of, there were two women choristers and one male chorister. We were booked in the Peachtree Manor, which was owned by, I think, a dentist. And at the bottom of the hill was the Biltmore, where everybody else was booked. But the black members couldn't stay at the Biltmore. So we then went from there to Tennessee. Let's see, I don't know whether we went to Tennessee first, but in Tennessee it was worse.
Yeah.
Than Atlanta. So it was rough at that time. Texas, at one point, Mr. Bing asked me, said, "Look, this is, we're living in this place where there are a lot of citizens who live here. There was a place that had a pool, and that many of the members of the Met on tour would like to stay. La Cabana, I think it was called." And we said, he said, "I would ask you if you would consider not going swimming." That would be a problem. The fact is, I don't swim anyway, so it wasn't a problem.
Exactly.
But he was strong enough to say this is going to be the case. He didn't, in this case, push it. But the interesting thing was that Birmingham had a huge Met group that supported the opera, and their big parties and so forth. And so before the company took off on that tour in 1962, they were contacted by Rudolph Bing was contacted by the people in Birmingham saying, we're looking for the Met coming, but we don't want black members to come to our affairs. And Bing said, fine. If you aren't going to accept your company to your affairs, then we won't come to Birmingham. And that's the last time the Birmingham was on the Met tour list.
Oh my gosh! And when was that? What year was that?
That was 1962.
Oh my gosh! So that's more than 60 years, almost 60. Is it 60 years? 1962?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
So it shows that it took a strong person,
yes,
to stand up to prejudice, to segregationist ideas, and say these singers have a right to be here. They are a member of the company, and wherever the company goes, they go.
Yeah,
and have a right to stand on this stage because they've proven it with their artistry, and do what they can do.
Oh wow! Well, that's interesting. I think this is a good place to make a segue. I think there have been advocates or allies for people of color in the arts for a long time, and there, even myself in the last week, that's the elephant in the room. There's been so much stuff going on, and I've been reached out to probably 50 people or more from different countries and different, who are not black, and those people are really in support of me as a black man and as an artist. And so in light of what's been happening this last week, it's been tough. It's been a tough time. And, I can imagine you having endured some of those things in the 1960s. And you can speak on that, being in the Metropolitan Opera in the 60s during the time of Martin Luther King Jr. Things about, Selma, Alabama, and all of the bombing in the church in Mississippi or Alabama, I believe it was. Forgive me if I get that wrong. Birmingham, exactly. But all these things that happened then, and, having someone be an advocate for us. And I appreciate all of my friends that have reached out to me, and like Mr. Bing, who was helpful to you and really cared about all the people because they were artists. I would like if you would speak to the listeners, and again, thank you all for tuning in. Speak to the listeners about how it was, the morale of the people in that time in the 1960s, and even before and after, where there was so much difficulty, of course, with the murder, as I call it, of George Floyd in Minneapolis, of course, and many other people that we can mention. A lot of people are hurting and stuff right now. So can you talk about what it was, what was inside you that made you feel that you can go forward, or you had some hope, or in the midst of all the chaos, what kept you in an okay place to make sure that you could be the best person that you could be? Because that was a lot, I imagine, to deal with in the 1960s, which is so much different today with all of the social media that's is readily, we can hear it in real time. We can see it in real time. People are protesting and demonstrating, and, police brutality and all these things are so big now as they were back in the day. How did you go forward with all that difficulty back in that time?
Well, all I can say is that with everything in my life, when I've been faced with something, there's no way of knowing how it's going to work out. So I don't focus on it not working out. I try to do the work that I'm given to do as best I can do it, and let the chips fall where they may. Now, I grew up in Detroit. My parents moved to Detroit when I was 6. The riots of the 1940s, we lived through. I don't know if you have read about those riots, and I think it was 1944. I remember as a child, I was about 7 or 8 years old, worrying about my father, who had to go out every day to go to work because blacks were being pulled out of their cars and beaten, and off the street cars and what have you. I saw some violence on my corner, actually, in the black neighborhood. The neighborhood I grew up in had some poor whites that lived in it. And one day I was standing near the corner of a big thoroughfare, Oakland Avenue and the Hague Street where I lived. And two white fellows came walking down the street together, and you could see that they were really concerned. There were groups of blacks standing around. And when they walked on the curb, one fellow standing there took a stick and hit one of the fellows over the head and knocked him to the ground. Just hit him one time. The fellow got up and picked up his crushed straw hat. His friend kept walking, and this fellow got up and staggered on following his friend. So growing up in Detroit was sort of, I guess, a training ground for dealing with this kind of strife and finding something implanted within that said, keep moving, just do what you're supposed to do, and let the chips fall where they may. So that prepared me for whatever was going to be, I was going to face as a young adult, as an adult, and now as a senior citizen. When I received the contract with the Met, here I was in this world. I just started singing operatically two years before that. And I had a lot of work to do to catch up in terms of roles. I mean, Oedipus Rex maybe has been done at the Met once, but not by me.
Right.
So I had a lot of work to do, and that's where my focus was, in trying to do what I needed to do to make sure that when I walked out on stage, that I was going to do the best I could do. At the Met, my colleagues were really helpful. I understood from one of my colleagues that only one person, a singer, a soprano from the South, with whom I did not sing at the Met, but she had expressed some discomfort or disgruntlement that I was now on the roster.
This was at the Met, you say?
At the Met, yeah. But everybody that I sang with at the Met, if they had any negative feelings, I wasn't aware of it. We all worked together as colleagues. Mm-hmm. This soprano was quite famous, and I eventually sang together, but with a regional company in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. We did the Carmen together, and it worked. I mean, we did what we needed to do. We didn't become buddy-buddy. And I can only hope that at some point she became a bit more comfortable being stabbed to death by me, as Don Jose.
Right.
But it was okay.
Let me ask you this, if I can ask you in regards to that. Did you ever feel that you were there and changing people's minds at that time, or making people more accepting of people of color? Like maybe if someone had the wow moment, like, wow, he's actually a great guy and a great artist, and I didn't expect that. Did you ever feel any energy like that?
Well, I hoped for it. And I think that the fact that singers that I worked with, we became friends. We became comfortable. So I have to assume that they were not acting, because I got a sense of genuine friendship from those people with whom I was able to work. So I have to assume that what you just said was happening as a result of our being colleagues together, working together to create something that was beautiful, that was beyond us.
Well, the thing is, we know most of the time that, people grow up, and I've heard this even in my life, that I've changed people's opinion of what black men are, what we can be. I remember being in university, and a young lady said to me, "You're so much different than other black guys." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you're in college." And I said, ugh. And I said, "Where'd you grow up?" And she said, "Well, my dad was in the NYPD." And I said, "Oh, okay." But I feel like, I've always taken the idea that I have to try to follow my path, lead my best life, and do what I can. And then people will see, because the fear that they hid behind before, that stuff gets stripped away when you begin to know the person. And that was the important thing that many people over the years that I've learned, they've understood that, of course, even when you try to bring it to today, they understand that we are just people who get up and want to have families and want to do good and want to abide by the law, regardless of the fact that we've led these lives that were not meant to be positive. Or, when the Constitution was written, it wasn't written with us in mind. And so with all of the hardship, we still want to be good fathers. We still want to be good, humanitarians, good citizens. We want to work a job and be paid an honest wage and everything else. But us doing what we do to the best of our abilities is the thing that can help change the mind of people. And so George Floyd, this guy who was, murdered this week in front of our eyes, they didn't know him by all the things he'd accomplished. And I wanted to ask you this: all the things you've done in your life, has the accomplishments you've had, has it ever been reduced to less than that based on the fact that someone saw you and didn't know that you were the first that had done all these wonderful, amazing things?
Well, I can't say, because maybe in their minds, in the minds of some people, that is there. But I've never seen myself as, other than being a teacher in the classroom, I've never put it in my mind that I'm going out to try to change somebody's mind about me and about people like me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that if I go out and I do the best I can do, then there may be some folks who do change their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be some folks who won't change their minds. I can't do anything about that. If I put wanting to change people's minds as my goal, then I think I'm misplacing
the
reason for being there. I can only have an influence on people through the way I am as a person and the way I approach my work and what happens when I do my work.
Exactly.
And as long as I am focused on that and being myself, then I have seen people's minds change. In the Army Chorus, as I said, I was the only black face in there, and many of the guys are from the South. And I saw change happen. I've gone to every reunion that we've had. If anybody had told me when I was drafted I'd be going to reunions of my Army unit, I would say, you got to be mine, right? But I've gone because I truly feel that family, that band of brothers, I feel that. When my wife gave birth to our daughter in 1957, there was one of my colleagues and friends in the chorus who went over to Walter Reed Hospital, pay her a visit, took her some flowers. His name was Rick Armstrong, and he's from Alabama, Caucasian, Tenor. And he told me later that when he got to the hospital, he told them whom he wanted to see. And he was asked, well, are you a member of the family? And he said, yeah. They let him upstairs. They had to know that, well, okay, I know. But that kind of feeling, and a few years ago, I was down in Florida, in Sarasota, for a master class or something. And before I went, I got a message from a fellow who had come into the chorus about a year before I was due to get out. And he was, I think, from Mississippi. And when he came in, he was not that friendly. He wasn't
inviting.
Yeah, he was just
standoffish.
Yeah, and so when I got this message from him, he said, I see you coming down to Sarasota. He said, I'd love to spend some time with you. I said, well, okay, fine. And so we got together, and he said, he said, when I joined the chorus, I had not had that much contact with blacks. And he said, And when we were to go to, I think, Texas, and the captain didn't let me go because there was some resistance. He didn't want me to be put off by that. And he said, and also when we sang somewhere and I saw that you couldn't stay with us, I got a sense for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow.
What it was like for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so this changed him. And I'm grateful for that. Grateful that I was used to change his mind and hopefully others that I feel that I've come closer to because of this bond of brotherhood. Because during the 60s, 50s, the guys who were growing up in the South had no opportunity to get to know, as friends, others like me who had a college education like them, and they couldn't socialize. So there was this wall of ignorance that existed that eventually began to be crumbled.
Chipped away at.
It's here again, looking at today, the wall is still not, it has not disappeared.
Correct.
I think that, I don't know if it ever will, because human nature, if one looks at the history of humankind, we're dealing with the same problems that were dealt with centuries ago.
Right.
Life is like a series, is like the waves of the ocean. There are a series of crests and troughs. Crests and troughs. And in the 60s, in the 50s, with the civil rights movement and so forth, we began to approach a crest when we thought and hoped and prayed that now, hopefully, we will get to a point where when we look at each other, we will look beyond what we look like, whether it's skin, whether it's size, whatever, whether it's gender. We will look to see what is in the soul of this mortal being who is mortal like me.
Exactly.
And we hoped that maybe we were getting there, but then there was a trough.
Right.
And then there was another crest and another trough, and we are definitely now in a trough.
Yes.
That is hitting us in a number of different ways. But the interesting thing is that the ocean always moves towards a shore. Crests and troughs. And so maybe, prayerfully, hopefully, one day, we will arrive at a shore that is secure when it comes to our appreciating the fact that we are all mortal. We all have faults, and those faults are not stuck on just one group of people. We're human. Right. And to see beyond, I think of Dr. Seuss, that wonderful story about children, about the Sneetches, some of whom had stars on their bellies and the others who didn't have stars. Right. And the ones who had stars on their bellies thought that they were better than the ones who didn't. Right. All Sneetches. Right. all human. So yeah. I don't know if that day will ever come because we are mortal. And yes. We are flawed. Every one of us is flawed. We have goodness and we have badness within us. No one's perfect. That's right. Well, and we have to hope that the goodness in us at some point takes over and overrules the negative. Well, there's so many people, I have to say to you, and I know we're having a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours and hours. It's interesting. A lot of people are saying thank you. A lot of tenors, I have a lot of tenors who are saying that, again, as I said in the beginning, when my microphone was off, how important, you were for me. There are people in Chicago, people in Indiana, people all over who are reaching out and saying, basically, if it hadn't been for you, you wouldn't, they wouldn't believe that they could pursue this. And the good in you that is coming through the screen and that you've lived your life and all the things that you've accomplished, so many people, and I can't, bring everyone's comment up, but so many people are so grateful to you for this knowledge that you're really imparting right now.
One thing I wanted to ask you is changing the subject a little bit because we can talk for hours and hours about the goodness of people and the times never really changing. One of the things I wanted to ask you, why do you think it is? It's not for lack of talent. I don't believe. Why do you think now that we're in 2020, if I were to name the black women that have been successful in opera, of course, Miss Price, Miss Bunbury, Miss Verrett, uh, um, Kathleen Battle, Roberta Alexander, Felicia Weathers. Of course, I call her my auntie, Martina Arroyo, Jesse Norman. There's so many people. But when you think about the black men, for us to look back, there aren't as many. Why do you think it is, having gone through the things you've gone through, that there are that many men that we can look to that have been successful as black men in opera?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said before. People in this country are still not comfortable seeing a black male singing love songs opposite a white female. And
how many, really quickly, how many of your partners were black during that in your career, or were they predominantly white?
Predominantly white. I mean, the only time I ever had a chance to sing with Leontine Price was a recording that, of course, if I did that.
My friend OC, he asked me.
Part of that is because she did a heavier repertoire than I did.
Right.
I sang Verdi Requiem with Martina Arroyo. We never sang an opera together on stage that I recall. So most, I'd say 98%, 98% of the heroines that I sang with were Caucasian.
Yes.
Were white. That was the way it is. Now, as to again why there are not more black men. Again, I think that black men who have the voices and they look at the possibility of using those voices operatically, first of all, if they want to. I mean, I've heard some phenomenal voices that I thought, holy smoke, what a Radames that would be, what an Otello that. They're not interested. They're using their voices in a manner that reflects who they are, and they don't see themselves singing in Italian or French or German or something other than their own language and doing what is comfortable for them, that feels right for who they are, and that has to be honored.
Exactly.
But for those of us who have been led in a different path, it's not going to be that easy because people are looking for a certain vocal quality that there are so many reasons why somebody can say, well, if you happen to be too short,
there's code.
All of these things. The whole thing of visual in opera, which I've written against and about, that has kept. Opera singers aren't usually matinee idols when it comes to look. I remember when I first sang with Caballé at the Met, we did a Traviata together, and some of my colleagues would go and say, oh, yeah. And I thought, come on. She moved on stage with such grace and sang the crap out of that.
Yes.
That I would rather hear her sing it. And I didn't care that she doesn't look like she's dying of tuberculosis. Come on.
Right, exactly.
It's about that. It's about singing that role in a manner that moves me and makes me believe.
Yeah.
Makes me believe with the voice. It's about the voice.
The most important thing is the voice, always.
Exactly. And there's all of this. I think that opera on video, it's fine in one case, but it puts people because the people who are usually hired to do those roles are more photogenic, all of that stuff.
Yes.
So you get to the opera house, you want to hear a voice that's capable of cutting a 90-piece orchestra.
There you go.
That voice is not necessarily going to come out of somebody who weighs 145 pounds. That looks like he's down.
It's not. Let me ask you this, Mr. Shirley, because we just have, I know this is supposed to be about an hour, but I think I'm going to go over a little bit. I don't want to let you go so fast. Just a little bit more of your time, if I can have. Is that okay?
That's fine.
But thank you. So many of my friends are reaching out, and I'm going to get through some of their questions because I had some people who sent me some things. But I have a friend named OC who's asking me how was the recording, and I'll ask if we can just maybe get through these questions pretty quickly. How was it recording the Cozy Fan Tutte with Leontine Price? How was that?
It was the top of the mountain, man. Top of the mountain. And it was a phenomenal experience. Eric Kleinsdorf gave us leave to really enjoy the recording, to act things out. And the whole cast was memorable for all the right reasons. I had a great time singing with these wonderful, wonderful artists. And to sing with Leontine was, as I said, you can't go any higher than that.
Okay, here's another question for you. As the first black tenor to perform a leading role at the Metropolitan Opera, Detroit's first black high school music teacher, yes, and the first black to sing in the U.S. Army Chorus, you, for me, are really a trailblazer, and you have a large list of accomplishments. Who were some of your role models, and what impact did they have on you in you forging your career?
Well, when I was a child in Indianapolis, at the age of 5, my family had role models. My mother sang, my father played the piano, and
Back on there. Hey, hello everyone. We're back. Hopefully you are all there as well. Sorry, but you were saying?
yes, my role models in Indianapolis when I was a child were Marian Anderson, certainly, Paul Robeson,
Yes.
and most certainly Roland Hayes, the first
Okay.
black tenor to have a national career. And surprisingly enough, there was one other who was not a singer, but whom I understand studied violin at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The great brown bomber Joe Louis.
The great boxing champion. Okay, now listen. All being someone who had so many firsts in your career, what was the experience like receiving the National Medal of Arts from the first black president, Barack Obama? How was that experience for you?
Well, like singing with Leontine Price, it was the top of the mountain. I sung at the White House a number of occasions as a member of the Army Chorus, and also with the Washington National Opera, which preceded Lincoln Kennedy Center. But and I sang for Kennedy, I sang for Eisenhower, but receiving that honor from the first black president was, on a level all of its own. It was something that was a complete surprise to me when I was selected for that. And
Deserving, but
well,
deserving.
I thank you for that. But again, it was something that I have to say was in my script, because I've only tried to do what I could do at the time I was asked to do it, and to have my efforts seen in that light and rewarded in that way is something that I'm grateful for. Grateful.
Wow. Well, thank you, Kameo, for that question about being the first black tenor. Tislam Swift, one of your Alpha Phi Alpha brothers, and I have all these alphas coming on my Facebook Live and talking about '06. I'm like, what in the world are they talking about? Anyway, he asked, did you ever have any, he said, Tislam said, did you ever, he said, what did he say? Have you ever had moments of doubt or uncertainty in your singing career, and how did you overcome them?
But of course, I've had moments of doubt. My Metropolitan Opera debut was full of doubt, but I had to get rid of it because it was the last minute. I was
Yes.
scheduled to make my debut later in the season, but Charlie Anthony became ill, and so I had to step into Così fan tutte.
Oh, wow.
I had never sung before, and I
Okay.
just learned the final ensemble the day before. I'd done a few rehearsals because Charlie Anthony was singing Traviata in Washington, D.C., and traveling back and forth, and he became ill. So the afternoon before that opening, Rudolph Bean came into my rehearsal and asked me if I could do the performance the next night. I said, yeah. I took a recording home of Tucker and Stever and
Wow.
walked through the staging in my living room all the rest of the day. And then the day of the performance, I did the same thing. And I went to the theater, put on my costume and makeup, walked out on stage and walked to the stage and didn't make any mistakes. And I have very little memory of my debut.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, there were a number of times during my career when at times when I wasn't singing that well and trying to work things out, that I had doubts. But something, I say something from above, kept pushing me forward, saying, keep doing the work that's in front of your nose to work this out. Go
Right.
out there and learn from the experience of performing. Learn from every experience and keep
Right.
going. And from my point of view, God will tell you when to shut your mouth.
I have another question from
And
another alpha. Sorry, I have another question from another alpha. But I mean, I want to give a shout out to my fraternity brothers, Kappa Alpha Psi. So I know you're in here too. But Vincent Davis says, when did you know your voice was seasoned or mature enough to start singing Wagner in heavier repertoire?
well, it was something that I felt capable of doing. Actually, I made my debut at Spoleto Festival in 1961, summer before I made my debut at the Met, singing Herod in Strauss's Salome. And Rudolph Bing knew that I was going to do this, and he said to me, "But this is terrible. It's always hitting on your voice." But I said, "But I can sing it. I won't yell it. I won't shout it." And it's in a small enough theater, the Calle Melissa Theater in Spoleto, that I can deal with it. And I sang it, and it was successful. So I've always approached singing Wagner. I've never attempted to sing Tristan or something like that, but
Right.
I've sung Loge, and at the Met I sang the Sailor's Voice. I sang Eric and also the Steuermann in Flying Dutchman. But I always
Exactly.
sang them. I didn't try to bellow over the orchestra. I tried to stay within my resonance adjustment and sing it and not bellow it. And I enjoyed a lot. I did David at Covent Garden, which is full of words, and it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
But I never thought of myself as being a Tristan or
Right.
Zygmunt or something, one of those heavier roles.
As Nicole said, you always sang it with your voice. That was the most important thing. Now, here's a question. You lived through what people call the golden era of singing through all those years, okay? Darren Flagg asked the question. He said, what do you think is missing today from in opera that was maybe present back in the day, in those years? What do you think is missing today?
Well, I've heard the phrase quite often, cookie cutter techniques, cookie cutter singing. I think that when I was at the Met, I was surrounded by some fabulous voices, tenor voices, Tucker, Corelli, Vickers, Gedda, all different voices singing with their voices. I couldn't identify amongst those that I sang a particular sameness of technical approach. And I think that possibly that might be something that is present in today's singers. The important thing is to find your voice and sing with your voice.
Thank you.
A lot of people a lot of students want to listen too much to successful singers in recordings and what have you, and that's dangerous because the more you listen to somebody singing something, their sound is implanted in your inner ear, and when you open your mouth, you're going to be imitating them, not singing with your voice. So I tell my students, I said, look, go on YouTube and listen to this aria maybe once, maybe twice, and no more. When you start singing it, record yourself singing so that your voice is reinforcing your voice.
Exactly.
Don't listen that much to other singers. Nobody's going to pay you to try to sound like Pavarotti or Brownlee or whatever. You've got to sing with what you were given and learn to sing technically in a healthy way.
Of course.
That helps one to retain their vocal thumbprint. So that everybody says, "Oh, I know who that is. That's Larry Brown. Oh, I know who that is. That's Hoffman." You want your individuality to be first and foremost in your excellent singing.
Yeah, that's
I I don't know if that answers the question or
it.
not.
Does it does answer? I mean, of course, it answers the question very well. I have just a couple more questions for you. And again, there's so many people who are writing on here on the comments that I have to bring you back for round two. And if you have some availability, we're just scratching the surface of so many things that people have to ask you because, again, you're such an important person. And I'll say it again for me and so many other tenors, specifically African American singers, sopranos. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Two more questions. Edward Graves asked the question: how do we as black men advocate for ourselves and our other colleagues of color without coming off as too aggressive or as seen as wanting a handout?
Oh boy. Well, I think first of all, you take care of your own artistry and trust that that's going to advocate for people like yourself, like ourselves. Uh, yes, you'll have to go beyond that. I know that quite often those who have management will be asked to tone down your message whenever you are interviewed. I think you have to find a way of stating the truth in an interview and standing up for yourselves and for your colleagues. When you find that someone is being maltreated, finding a way to express that and knowing that no matter how you do it, somebody is liable to get ticked off about it.
You
But
can't please everyone.
there's an Asian saying. We say that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. There's an Asian saying that the nail that stands above the others is the one that gets hammered in the head. And there's no way of getting around that fact. So if you take a stance that is powerful and is delivered with compassion and honestly, chances are you will get hit in the head. I mean, you can't avoid that. So picking your fights and then taking your stance, but letting your artistry speak as strongly as it possibly can. Then things will be what they will be.
Oh wow.
We, when we back in the 70s, there was an organization formed by Francois Clemens, who people will remember as Officer Clemens on what was the show? Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh yes.
Francois Tenor sang for a brief time at New York City Opera. But he joined with a bass, I think, the last name was Smart, and formed an organization called International Black Opera Singers, IBOS, IBOS. And I was a member of that organization, and we were bound together to try to make the case for black male singers in the future. We did concerts, we did a number of things, and we were written up in the New York Times and what have you. And there were a lot of people who kicked back against that. But it was something that needed to be done, a message that needed to be out there for people to consider. So things like that. There was more strength in numbers, if you will, but here again, there were people who didn't appreciate it in the business, and that is a risk that one takes. I don't know if that makes the person who asked the question any more comfortable, gives them any more ideas about how to take a stance,
right,
and speak the truth.
Right.
Because when you do that, there is a risk involved, and I don't know of any safe way of doing it.
Yeah, but when you talk about that, you said, part of that question, he was saying, how does it make it seem that we're not wanting a handout? We want to be hired. And I've always felt like in my heart of hearts that your talent should do the speaking for you. And so my dad told me a very valuable thing a long time ago is to worry about the things I can control. So I want to go and make sure that I'm not put at a disadvantage because the person is on the other side looking at me with a place to either hire or fire me. I need to make sure I can come and let my artistry speak for what, and be my representation. But this is the last question. And if I didn't ask your question, I'm sorry, because there's a lot of stuff. And I think I will have to try to get you back on here for round two because you're a fountain of wisdom and just everything you're saying is spot on. I appreciate that. And I'm not just saying that. You know me. We've known each other for 20 years now. And I have always revered you. You know that. And I think the world of you, Mr. Shirley. But here's the question I have. Because a lot of people are asking the question now, why aren't blacks being hired in opera? And every opera company that I've been to does not have a general director, an artistic administrator, a chief financial officer. None of them have that. And there's a group of people that we're like a caucus. We talk amongst ourselves because we really want to be mentors and helpful to young singers. And so one of the questions I want to ask you, because I don't know if you've seen it either, we feel that we need to be able to get into positions of administration. Somebody needs to be the first black general director of an opera company or major orchestra. Someone needs to be the casting manager of one of these important opera houses, and not that they're necessarily going to give, all black people, like it's going to be open the door and all the blacks. But I think being that type of person will bring this idea of more fairness. So one of the questions is, and someone kind of alluded to it, to one of the questions they sent, how can we begin to break down those walls and become the administrators and other things? Do you have any advice for us who want to pursue jobs and that we can be the ones that are hiring and bringing other black people and people of all races, genders, sexual preferences in the door? How can we do that? Do you have any advice for that?
Well, Michigan Opera Theater is run by Wayne Brown, who is African American. Mm-hmm. And he held a position for many years within the National Endowment for the Arts, a very important position. He started in management with, I think, as an orchestral manager. So he built years of experience in arts administration, and we were very happy to have him. He took over from David DiChiera, and things up until now have gone extremely well. So what we need are young people who are willing to step in to training programs to get degrees in arts management. Because I don't know how many blacks have degrees in arts management. They may be not going that way because they think, well, am I going to be able to get a job? Well, it comes down to people like myself not worrying about whether I was going to be hired or not as an opera singer, but following the impetus that came, as far as I'm concerned, from above that says, take the time, sign up for an extra year, study with this man, and trust me, and we'll see where it goes.
Sometimes,
so I would encourage young people who have a bent for management, arts management, to pursue degrees in arts management. That way, at least when they come out, they have the credentials that can prepare them to enter on the lower echelon of arts management for those companies that are willing then to open the doors to them.
Right. And for them to be vocal and to say, I have the aspirations to be a general director. And I know some people, some young people. I have a good friend named Cayenne who's doing some wonderful things, and she's, now in Michigan doing some work there. And, I expect her to be a general director of one of these companies. And there are a lot of people, a young guy by the name of Tevin, who's a very energetic, very smart guy. And there's many of them out there. But, locating the people, and this is the hard part, I think, locating the people that will give them the opportunity to expand, for them to say, look, this is the door that's open. And I hope some of these companies will say, let me create a position. let me do something so I can do this specifically for a person of color. I'm not looking for affirmative action, but there are so many talented people that have been turned away because of the issues that we have been talking about so long. But for these people to open the door, and if you have other people of color that can say, you know what, I see good in you, I see potential in you, and I want to make sure that you don't have any impediments in trying to achieve your goals. I think that can also be helpful. Do you agree?
I agree. I mean, here again, you can't worry about whether the door is going to open.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be prepared, and then let the level of your preparedness speak for you. And hopefully, somebody's going to say, "Well, yeah, this person has what we need." Uh, for instance, to see black administrators form an opera company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some smaller regional companies. The one down in Louisiana.
There was Houston Ebony Opera, a couple of those. There's one in Chicago, South Shore, I think it's called. Yes.
Right, South Shore. Yes, indeed. So, not to be afraid of taking a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If I had been afraid of taking a chance, I would have gone back to Detroit and resumed my teaching career. And the reason why I didn't do that, one of the main reasons, was because I didn't want to wind up 10 years down the road kicking myself
Regrets.
for not finding out whether the old guy who said you can have a career, whether he knew what he was talking about. In 1957, the chorus didn't travel that much.
Mm-hmm.
And before I made the decision, before I was even presented with it, in 1957, we took a trip to California to sing for an ROTC convention. And the captain put a concert with the Denver Symphony at Red Rocks Amphitheater for us on the way back to Washington. We had about 3 days in Denver area to rehearse with the orchestra. And one day, 4 of us rented a car. We had time off. One of those persons was our barbarian, who I mentioned before. And we drove up into the mountains. We went to see the campus of the University of Colorado. And we wound up that afternoon in Central City. Central City has an opera house. It's a big tourist attraction. And we were walking down the main street, and Ira saw someone that he'd been in law school with coming towards us. As it turned out, this fellow was the head of the tour. He was the chief tour guide, and he also was the head usher for the opera. We wound up with free tickets to see Rigoletto that night. My first opera as a spectator. The Rigoletto was Frank Guerrera, who was one of the Metropolitan Opera stalwarts. The soprano Gilda was Joan Carroll, who was an American who was having a successful career in Europe, singing roles like Lulu and what have you. The tenor was a guy named John Crane, who sang with the New York City Opera. And I sat there that night listening to my first opera as a spectator, listening to John Crane blow the walls out of that theater. I'm thinking,
you still got it, Mr. Shirley.
I was speaking. But I sat there that night thinking, man, it's a good thing that I never wanted to be an operatic tenor, because I could never do that all night long. Little realizing that 4 years later, I would make my debut at the Metropolitan Opera with Frank Guerrera and Cosi fan tutte.
Oh my gosh!
And 2 years after that, sing the role of in Lulu, the tenor with Joan Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we don't know what lies ahead.
Absolutely.
And to not take the chance, if it comes to us strongly enough to take it, then we chance losing out on what is ahead. So you can't be afraid of it.
Yes.
If it's coming to you strongly enough from above, do it. Then do it.
Yeah, Mr. Shirley. Wow, I could talk to you for hours. It's been almost an hour and a half, and we had some slight technical problems in the beginning, but I'm happy that we've had a wonderful conversation. Again, everybody keeps saying that I have to bring you around for round two, and so if it fits in your schedule, maybe later in the summer. I would love to have you back and to explore some of these other things, maybe to get to some of these other questions I have over here. But I have to say to you again, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for what you mean to so many people. Thank you for what you mean to me. Of course, it is great to feel like that you are a mentor and a friend and also one of my idols. You've always been so kind to me and really encouraging me, and the belief that I could do it came from knowing you. So I appreciate that so much. I'm glad that you're staying safe in the midst of COVID. I'm glad that you're staying safe, and
Well,
yes.
you stay safe. Stay vigilant. All of you who are on this call, stay vigilant. Don't let your guard down because you don't want to be knocked out for the
Right.
count. This foe that we don't understand how this foe fights. So keep your guard up. And thank you for this opportunity. And I think that given the way things are going, my schedule is going to be pretty free. So whenever you want, I'm going to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, Mr. Shirley, and all of you who've been on this. Thank you so much for supporting this. Thank you to the various people that have said that, spread this on social media. I have a lot of fun doing this, and I hope to continue doing it throughout the summer for the foreseeable future, and we'll see how that goes. Next week, come back. I will be joined by one of my friends who I consider him my little brother, Will Liverman, the fantastic young baritone. We're almost twins, but he's much better looking and younger and weighs a lot less. But no, Will is a good friend of mine, and we'll have a fun conversation next week. So thank you to you all. Be blessed, be safe, and come back next week for another episode of the Sit Down with LB. Take care.